Do you think Western society is thriving, declining, or evolving? Is there much that you would change? Well, many people think that Western society is collapsing, and some even want it to. I mean, there's obviously a lot of negatives, but there's a lot of positives too. And the question is should it be refined or should it be torn down completely? All of that and more on today's episode of The Fractured Machine Show. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. I'm Matt, and welcome back to The Fractured Machine Show. Western society is getting trashed daily by protesters, anarchists, media, even your uncle. But countries who've adopted Western ideas, like Iceland, Germany, Norway, Switzerland, and Denmark, actually top the Human Development Index of scores like 0.959 or 0.972 in 2025 and 2026, which that is substantially high. Meanwhile, Freedom House in 2026 reports that the Scandinavian countries such as Finland, Norway, and Sweden are near perfect Western nations. I mean, is Western ideology really all that bad? Or is it that we overlook the concept and that it can actually work very well? Because there's a lot of people that oppose these ideas. So where's a good starting point? Let's start off with the strengths and weaknesses. Beginning with strengths, we first look at prosperity and innovation. Capitalism and mixed economies drive unmatched wealth to the citizens, especially when compared with other societal structures. Western nations lead the world on GDP, education, and life expectancy, with Norway, Iceland, and Switzerland greatly leading the pack. Makes you think what they're doing right and what are we doing wrong. Another topic of strength in Western society are freedom and rights. Democratic republics and representatives protect law, free speech, and even elections. And I mean, most Western countries are considered free, and we greatly take this for granted because only approximately 21% of the world's population live in a free society. Please consider for a second all the people that are willing to leave their homes to come to a Western society. Some of those people have lived through true horror that none of us from the West will truly understand. Isn't that an important point? Like, if you're from the West, what would it take for you to leave your home and move to a different country, which might speak a different language, have a different currency, where you don't know really anybody? You might not have any real education or skills, and you're coming on the pretense of hope for opportunity, hope for safety, hope for a better life for you and your family. These are topics in the West that we don't understand, and I hope we never do. But it is a good point as to why freedom is so important around the world, especially when you talk to people that come from a place that wasn't free. And that's something that Western society does right. Another strength is quality of life. There's low poverty, reliable healthcare, opportunity, and mobility. And just that idea, billions around the world have escaped poverty because global capitalism and other Western values. So those are some pros. Now let's look at some cons or some criticisms. Inequality is a big one, perceived and actual. It does exist. And although there's no guarantee that you're going to break through the West's version of poverty, compared to other countries that don't have Western values, it is still vastly more. Another criticism is geopolitical hypocrisy, where foreign policy prioritizes interests over democracy. And I'll touch on that a little bit more later. But looking at the political landscape between conservative and liberal, we break them down into also pros and cons, because both can see the advantages and disadvantages of Western society. Conservatives tend to emphasize individual liberty and free markets as the superior form of governance. And competitions in these markets fuel innovation and prosperity. And despite there being unequal outcomes at times, everybody should have the same opportunity to succeed and be prosperous. And the conservatives would go on to say that moral and cultural decay is being really heavily impacted by Western society. Although I think that has been going on, it's like a transition or an evolution. I do see that as being a pretty big factor, especially over the last decade or so. On the liberal side, they view pluralism, human rights advancement, and social safety nets, which is a socialist idea, all as Western strengths. But how can capitalism exist with socialism? Well, capitalism allows for different styles of governance within it, where you could still be in a free market society and have aspects of socialism. We look to welfare, we look to fire, police, and paramedics, at least in Canada, education, infrastructure improvements. I mean, that's the idea of taxes. If you're 100% against taxes, which is a fair perspective, you also have to understand that the reason for these taxes are to provide a service to everybody, regardless of age, sex, and race. And although that is a socialist idea, it does help a lot of people. Now, some people will take advantage of each one of those things, but we should try to understand if the people who are taking advantage of these services are the exception or the rule. Now, a reason that liberals might say that Western society is bad are systemic issues like excessiveness, environmental harm, and inherent inequality fueling unrest. Look, both sides are reasonable takes. They both have positive views on the West and areas that it can improve, which to think Western society is perfect would be a fallacy, but to think that it should be torn down might be a fallacy as well. In the West, we tend to think that all of our problems have easy fixes, but tearing down society for what we know it as today, especially when, as far as what the data is showing, is that this is the most advanced society and the best for citizens, is not actually progressive, it's regressive. And at some point, you have to ask yourself, are you actually trying to make things better by detesting Western society, or are you trying to gain a position of power? I mean, I get it. If you look at society and you see what you perceive as inequality, and you think that's coming from the systemic level, then major reform would be in the realm of possibility of thought. Now, is it going to be reform, or is it going to be complete destruction and change of government styles? And if you tuned in and you want to see the West collapse, just stop for a moment and ask yourself, what is the reason? Going back to the conservative versus liberal platforms and what they say is negative about Western society, does it include moral or cultural decay? Maybe it's religious ideas that are now no longer being followed and you think they should be followed. Maybe you look at Hollywood as being an American staple, and when the Epstein files come out and you see these Hollywood names included on it, maybe that you used to look up to. I mean, it was inherently evil what they were doing, allegedly, but is that a reason that you want to watch the West get destroyed because of some evil? Because you could blame society all you want, and you could blame the people in society all you want. But if we generalize, most Western nations do good for their citizens. You have a couple of assholes, but for the most part, most people want to do good. Or at least that's what I'd like to believe. Is the reason you want to watch it burn is because people are living excessive lifestyles, always getting more than they can afford, always chasing a dollar. You look at it as a version of slavery, maybe. Or is it environmental concerns? Do you see that the West has a bad impact on the environment, so you want to see it torn down because of that reason? Could it be that you were manipulated to think that way? Could it be simply that we just don't have enough information? Or is there ways that we can improve our environmental impact, especially with big corporations? Does that require Western civilization to fall? Or maybe inherent inequalities? Maybe you see sex, race, and poverty as some of the biggest issues when it comes to inequality, which I'm not disagreeing with, but maybe there is a simpler way that we can correct those issues without destroying society. Or maybe we are trained to hyperfixate on those issues so that we can never get along. Maybe inequality is a manufactured idea and it comes from comparing yourself to others. Not to say that it's not an issue, but maybe we should realize that most people are unequal to other people when you compare them to them. And if everybody's unequal to each other, does it mean we're all equal and that we are unequal to each other? It's like the whole notion of people saying that you're special, and then you know that there's 8 billion other people on the planet, and then there's always somebody out there that could do something better than you. So are you special? Are you unique? Yeah, you are special and unique, but you're also a part of humans, which is a way more complicated thought. And yes, maybe humans are special, and maybe each one of us is unique in our own way, but we're always going to have similarities. That's what comes with being a part of a species. And we're similar enough so that, say for example, if you take acetaminophen because you have a headache, chances are, unless you're allergic to it or have some sort of liver issue, it's probably going to work for you like it works on most other people, because these rules exist within our species, but there are always exceptions. So my point of that was to say that inequalities are a human-made construct. We're all unique, we're all equal, but we're also all unequal. And if the reason you want to see Western society collapse is because any of those reasons, please understand that the West allows for improvements to happen, whether it be by personal initiative, the use of voting and political reform, or even at the corporate level. Try to understand that other government, political structures, and societies simply don't always allow that. But then maybe you also want to rip it down because of what it was founded upon. And yeah, there was probably a lot of injustices that caused Western society to develop into what it is today. But there are a couple points, and bear with me for a second. When you were born, your mother probably experienced severe temporary pain. And if you get into an accident, knock on wood, and you were at fault, or even if you weren't at fault, afterwards, you are probably going to be a safer driver. This all to say that there are two important points that can relate from those examples. Number one is that beautiful things require pain, sacrifice, and time. And yeah, I just called you beautiful. And ask yourself, is that something worth the pain, sacrifice, and time. And number two is the power of hindsight. Understand where we went wrong. And if you're honest about it, that can only help the development of society into something much greater. You could probably see the relation between the two examples that I gave and those 2 points. And of course, it's not all cut and dry and easy, but there are other avenues of thought that you can take instead. I'm going to bring up the idea of slavery for a second. It's an awful idea that the West used to incorporate. And through time and advocation, society understood where it went wrong and corrected it. And I think that's a true accomplishment for the West, as there are still non-Western countries that practice slavery to this day, but it's not the West, at least in the classic sense of a slave. You can make an argument saying that we're slaves still, but to make that argument, you'd have to ignore what slaves actually went through. And we look to the abolishment of slavery as being obvious, but around the world that idea is still felt by their citizens. And I'm not a Western apologist. I just think that that's a big point of contention today, and that those who want to tear this down do not have the majority of people's best interests in mind, and that the people that want to tear this down are doing a pretty good job at doing that. So let's compare capitalism with democracy. And the idea is that mixed capitalism, for example, like with those safety nets that I mentioned earlier, outperforms really any alternatives. There's innovation and growth without financial stagnation, and that's somewhere where communism fails. Let's look at a stat from the US. Approximately 59% favor capitalism, which is down. But then you look towards the majority of the time, it is the Liberal Party who have been kind of geared towards favoring socialism. And that's the remainder of the approximate 38 to 41%. And this is a relatively new phenomenon in the West. It would likely solve the majority of the financial inequality problems that we face, but you wouldn't have more, you would have less. So that's why if we look around the world to socialist countries like Cuba, you'll notice that it's not necessarily the best way to govern at a national scale. The next comparison is to autocratic governance. That's where there's individual, either person or party control, such as a dictatorship. Sure, it might offer some short-term solutions, but they all fail long-term, especially with the Human Development Index and freedoms. There's lower prosperity, repression, control over resources, and information. Does that sound like a free society to you? Does that sound like something that somebody would want to escape their country to go towards? Maybe some people, if they have it in their brains to hate the West. I think the most important part here is that democracy has the ability to course correct, and capitalism innovates to keep moving us forward. It is the best system we have. But what I would say is my biggest critique about the West is that a capitalistic democratic society is currently victimized by the corrupt leaders who obtain monetary gain by either following their corporate or media interests and affiliations. Look, we all know corruption is a thing, but we pay the price. And if the greed of these people is what takes us out, then I hope that in the future, countries that are practicing Western values can somehow find a way to correct that issue. And I mean, they're trying. In some places, they are trying. But the problem is when the majority of the politicians are corrupt, well, guess who has to pass any bills to prevent the corruption? It's almost a trap. It's almost like people shouldn't have that amount of power. But we trust them with it because we are either in a democratic society or in a republic. I mean, there's others too, but I'm saying North America. Us people are the real power. We have the majority by far. If you want to fight for something that matters, something that truly matters is corruption in the government. They are above the law. And not all of them use their powers for personal gain, but there are some that do. And anytime that happens, it brings us closer to the breaking point in the West. But let's talk about more remedies. What else can either fix the West or fix our perceptions on the West? Firstly, we have to reclaim Western strengths, such as liberty and innovation, while improving Western's flaws, which you could fix financial inequality through policy and social division through appropriate dialogue. And why is social division here important? Because it's important everywhere. Have you seen my other video? There needs to be a movement where people learn to put aside their differences and work together to make the world greater. Just think about it for a second, that the evil and the corruption in the world, think of it like it's a virus. Human idea and ingenuity and innovation is the cure. We can fix this, but we have to put all of our minds together and work together. I'll bring up a quick example. Like, there's two kids at a camp and they got into a fist fight. And what this camp would do was whenever two people got into a fight, they'd force them to sit on a bench, just the two of them with somebody around to make sure that they didn't fight again. And they said, you're going to sit here until you put aside your differences. And the story ends by them becoming best friends to this day. It's because, yes, you got into an altercation. Yes, you fought. Yes, you were probably so angry that you really didn't like that person and you just wanted them to feel it. But when you sit down, people will talk about their similarities. They'll talk about what brings them together. Even the intellectual debates that I watch that are on YouTube or Rumble or X or whatever website, they're not trying to find common ground. They're trying to prove their point. I think there's a lot of ego, but let's try to put aside our ego, because it's not helping us as a species. It's not helping us. And I don't expect everybody to sing Kumbaya and hold hands and laugh and sing and eat chocolate. But what I'm saying is that here's the cure: to be reasonable and talk to each other like that person is you experiencing life through a different consciousness. If you see the perspective I have like it's your own, then you might not be so quick to be angry, to be violent. Even if you disagree with it, at least you could say something like, I see your perspective. My perspective is that with the evil people in the world, you can't just hold hands and sing Kumbaya and eat chocolate. Sometimes that needs a little bit more intervention. And I would say, can't that be solved diplomatically? And maybe you'd say, yeah, I guess you could use your words instead of violence. That is a more reasonable take than the original position. So I mean, let's meet in the middle. Compromise. Something that's going to make you happy and me happy. I mean, really, how can you disagree with that? Unless you're individualistic and only want to make yourself happy. If you're interested, there's also a video that I made on individualism and materialism. And maybe you can see that some of these videos are starting to tie together. It's because we have a message, and that message is peace. That was a rant. Another remedy is to stay neutral. Western society, it's not necessarily the best. I mean, one day, maybe in 100, 200, 300 years, we might come up with something that makes our current way of life look like an extremist dictatorship. But right now, it is the best that we've got. And another remedy is to challenge your own views. Ask yourself, what Western value is worth defending and what value is worth improving? If you come at it from a reasonable perspective and believe that you can meet in the middle with somebody, who knows? Maybe your idea won't only convince me, but it might convince everybody else. But that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching this video on if Western society is really that bad. I really hope you enjoyed it today. But if you'd like to continue the conversation, you can always email the channel, thefracturedmachineshow@gmail.com. And if you'd like, you could follow us on X at TFMachineShow. Please like and subscribe. And if you want to send this message out to the world, please share. But that's it. Once again, my name is Matt, and this is The Fractured Machine Show. Take care, and we'll see you next time.